Today, we are going to talk about punctuation on the SAT. So, SAT punctuation questions are structured like fill-in-the-blank questions. For example, you will have 4 choices and usually a long paragraph, but I just use a sentence example, 2 sentences. I took my dog for a walk, blank, afterwards I ate some food. Then you would select the answer that would fill in the blank. Before we start discussing punctuation on the SAT, we need to talk about clauses. There are 2 types, independent and dependent clauses. Independent clauses can stand as their own sentence. They're their own individual idea. So for example, I walked my dog, Sarah went to the store, my mom loves pancakes. Dependent clauses cannot stand as their own sentence. Since it's his birthday, after her swim practice, because she loves breakfast foods. Now, there are a wide list and ranges of words that are often the starting of a dependent clause. But basically, if you read it and it doesn't make sense as its own sentence, it's a dependent clause. So, let's combine some of these. I walked my dog since it's his birthday. Sarah went to the store after her swim practice. My mom loves pancakes because she loves breakfast foods. Those are all sentences that use both an independent and a dependent clause. So there are 4 types of punctuation on the SAT. There are many more, but in general, the SAT will only test you on these: semicolons, colons, em dashes, and commas. So let's talk about semicolons. Semicolons are used in a few ways. They can be used to merge 2 independent clauses. So, I walked my dog, colon, I gave her treats. I walked my dog is a standalone sentence, and I gave her treats can also be used as a standalone sentence. Used as a super comma when separating subjects in a list that have a comma in them. So, for example, over the summer, I went to Baltimore City, Maryland, semicolon, Hershey, Pennsylvania, semicolon, and Richmond, Virginia. Let's highlight why you cannot use commas in this list. So, over the summer, I went to Baltimore City, Maryland, Hershey, Pennsylvania, and Richmond, Virginia. So, there's a few problems with this. This is using just commas. First of all, the sentence doesn't make a lot of sense for 2 reasons. 1, Baltimore City is in Maryland and Hershey is in Pennsylvania. So, why are you listing them separately? And also, when you're listing something, you should have after an and, there should only be 1 word after the and. So, or 1 subject, not necessarily 1 word. If it's only commas, there should only be 1 word after the and. So, here you can correct it by using a super comma in this case. So, over the summer, I went to Baltimore City, Maryland, because Baltimore City is located in Maryland, semicolon, Hershey, Pennsylvania, Hershey is located in Pennsylvania, and Richmond, Virginia. This makes it grammatically correct and much easier for someone to read. Now let's talk about colons. Colons have 1 main use that technically is 3 mini uses. It's used to introduce a list, quotation, or example or explanation / elaboration after an independent clause. I got a bunch of food at the store, colon, apples, cereals, and potatoes. That's an example of a list. Lily's words reminded me much of my mother's, colon, look at the sky. Do the stars dance to you like they do to me? This is an example of introducing a quotation and then using a colon to separate the quotation. I really like Mrs. Cindy's class. She's funny and I love geography. That's an explanation / elaboration of why that student likes Miss Cindy's class. Em dashes are definitely not the one you come across very often in writing. The other ones come up a lot more often, but it's important to talk about the uses of em dashes. So, the main reason you're probably going to see an em dash is it's used to offset non-essential information, which is the same as parentheses. So, for example, carbon dioxide, em dash, known as CO2, em dash, can be used as a weak acid. Let's highlight the sentence and look at it further. So when we mean to offset non-essential information, we mean that if we took if we took known as CO2 out of the sentence, it would still totally make sense without it. And you wouldn't be removing any information. This is how parentheses function. So carbon dioxide can be used as a weak acid, but if you want to highlight that it's known as CO2, even though it's not really essential information, you can still do that with em dashes. So if you see that one of the options is an em dash on the SAT, look for a second one later on to see if that information contained is not essential information. The second use is to introduce lists. I got a bunch of food at the store: apples, cereal, and potatoes. It basically functions like a colon in that sense. So, commas. They're used to separate subjects in a list. My favorite classes are math, art, and English. It's also used to offset non-essential information, same as parentheses. Baltimore City, comma, which is located in the state of Maryland, comma, has a population of 569,931. So you can see that if the non-essential information is which is located in the state of Maryland, you could technically put parentheses around this. You could also just say located in the state of Maryland. That's another way to correctly say it. It's also used to link dependent clauses that come before an independent clause. So when I was a kid, comma, I played outside of my backyard. So you could add this like dependent clause after, and it should be fine in most cases. But before, it's when I was a kid, comma, I played outside of my backyard. So let's highlight this and look at this further. So as you can see, the dependent clause is at the start, but the independent clause is at the end. When I was a kid, comma, I played outside of my backyard. When I was a kid is the dependent clause because that doesn't make sense as its own sentence, but this functions as an independent clause. But when you put the dependent clause after the independent clause, you don't necessarily need a comma. Commas are also used to link independent clauses, similar to semicolons, but you can only do this with a coordinating conjunction represented by the acronym fanboys. Yeah, I guess, comma, space, but I'll keep a lookout. So let's talk about coordinating conjunctions. There are 7 coordinating conjunctions represented by the acronym fanboys. There's for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So all of these can be used in the same way in this sentence. Basically, there's going to be a word the word before the coordinating conjunction, in this case is but. There is going to be a comma after that word, space, and then the coordinating conjunction. So let's move on to the next one. Let's review. Independent clauses can function as their own independent sentence that completes a thought, while dependent clauses cannot. For example, an independent clause would be, I walked my dog, but dependent clauses would be, because she likes pancakes. Semicolons are used to merge 2 independent clauses or as a super comma. So you can merge, so if you see 2 sentences that can stand as their own sentence, they are probably merged by a semicolon. Or if you see a list that has a comma between 2 words after an and, then it's likely that a semicolon will need to be used. You can also look for this in the list. If the list contains semicolons, it's likely that your answer, if the blank is in the list, will require a super comma. Colons are used to introduce a list, quotation, or explanation/elaboration after an independent clause. Usually these list quotations and explanations/elaborations could not function as their own sentence. Explanation and elaborations can sometimes function as their own sentence, but it varies on said explanation/elaboration. Quotations could technically stand as their own sentence, but if they have quotations and do not have elaborations being introduced, it's likely that a colon may be your answer. End dashes are used to offset non-essential information and introduce a list. So it has similar uses to commas in that sense and colons in that sense. Keep in mind which of these punctuations could be confused with one another and what makes each one unique. Commas are used to separate subjects in a list, offset non-essential information, link dependent clauses that come before an independent clause, and to link independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction. Fanboys. This is a lot, but it's important to understand.